Hi, I'm your educator, Joanne DiGeso, and in this video, we will taste a 2004 La Rioja Alta Viña Arana Rioja Reserva from Spain. My main focus today will be showing you how I approach wine tasting and providing some sound advice about how to find aromas in wine and for identifying wine structure. Of course, we will be doing this using our SAT and Wine Lexicon, which is found in your course resources in the online classroom or on pages 14 or 15 of your text. In fact, it's best if you read chapter 1 on tasting and evaluating wine before watching this video. We'll also tie some of what we find in the glass into the theory of our textbook, which we call our WSET DNA. By the end of the course, you will also inhabit the WSET DNA, but at this point, you haven't even read the textbook yet. So for you, just concentrate on following the SAT in sequential order and searching for wine descriptors. Now, we will taste a red wine. And as a reminder, there's no blind tasting in your exam on level 2. At this level, our exam is made up of 50 multiple choice questions to be completed in 1 hour. However, you may be asked to identify certain wine styles, and that could likely be in the form of a tasting note. The point I'd like to make on this is this. Don't overthink it. With time, it will come, and you should take a moment to give yourself a congratulatory hug for taking the first steps by joining this wine class. Now, let's get into the tasting. First, the tools. We'll need a clean and transparent ISO wine tasting glass or a glass that has a wider bowl that tapers to the top. Make sure there are no strong odors around, perfumes, colognes, even hand soap, and we'll need a white background, so I have some paper here. We'll need some wine. So here is the 2004 La Rioja Alta Viña Arana Rioja Reserva, and this is a 2004. We'll read all about Rioja and the Tempranillo grape that makes up most of this blend in chapter 19 in your textbook. So feel free to pause this video, jump ahead and read about Rioja before watching the rest of this video. Tip number 1. Always take the time to read the wine label before tasting because there's so much information we can glean from the label. And by the end of this course, we'll all be able to predict the wine style of many bottles even before we taste them. This label tells us that this is a Rioja wine from Spain, and our text tells us that this is made mostly of the grape Tempranillo, which is typically medium to full-bodied and has medium acidity, medium levels of tannin, and our text also tells us that the wine show red fruit flavors of strawberry, red cherry, and black fruit flavors of blackberry and black plum. Finally, the label tells us that this is a Reserva wine. And after reading chapter 19, we know that for wines from Spain, this wine has spent a long time maturing in new oak barrels and in bottle before being released. Therefore, we can expect some primary fruit aromas that come from the grape variety, secondary aromas that come from the winemaking, such as small oak barrels, as well as tertiary aromas from maturation, also because it's the 2004. So I am expecting this to run through primary, secondary, and tertiary aromas and flavors. And so therefore, we'll also expect some dried fruit and mushroom and earth. Since we are just starting out, one way to help us pick out aromas and flavors in the wine is to use the textbook and see if we can pick up those notes. Tip number 2, use Google Translate to properly pronounce all of these exotic foreign words and grapes on wine labels. We might as well learn how to say the names properly. Plus, it gives us some serious cool points when we're out with a group. Tip number 3, it's always good to taste with other people. So form a tasting group and meet regularly. This is the fastest way to learn how to taste, by learning off of each other. Let's move on to our tasting. Using our SAT, we should be following the systematic approach to tasting in sequential order every time we taste wine. By doing so, we are establishing a way to taste wines objectively and form conclusions about the quality level of the wine. And by using both the SAT and the wine lexicon, we are using a common language to describe wine so I understand your tasting notes. Let's move on to our tasting using our SAT. First, either the wine is clear or hazy, and this wine is clear. Hazy is just some particles suspended in the wine. It may indicate a fault, but you'll just have to taste the wine to know. Often haziness just means that the wine has not been clarified with a filter before packaging. Next, we assess the intensity of the color, and it is either pale, medium, or deep. For me, I find it's easiest to assess the color intensity of white and rosé wines at a 45-degree angle, whereas for red wines, I think it's easiest just to look straight down on the glass when it's sitting upright over a white background. Now, this only works if you're using ISO glasses and pouring the same amount of wine in each glass every time. And that amount is 50 milliliters or 5 cl or 1.7 ounces of wine. So I look down into this glass, and if I can completely see the stem easily, the wine is pale. If I can't see the stem at all, the wine is deep. But if I can see even just a little bit of the stem but not see it completely, then the wine is medium. And note that most wines are medium, as medium operates along quite a long range on the spectrum. This wine is deep. Let us assess the color. And for colors to choose from on the SAT, you have purple, ruby, garnet, and tawny. Now, the most common color for red wine using this scale is ruby. Now here's where we need to take our white background and look at the wine at a 45-degree angle. And we are now looking at the outer rim. If there's a noticeable blue or purple color, the wine is described as purple. And if you want to see what a purple wine looks like, many young Malbec wines from Mendoza, Argentina are purple in color. But if there is a noticeable orange or brown color to the rim, we would assess the wine as garnet. Tawny is generally used for the assessment of port and for very old, rare wines. Color in red wines comes from the grape skins, and that's why the fermentation happens with the skins in red wine making. Oxygen, though, also influences the color of red wine as it matures and ages. So as red wines age, they lose their color and they begin browning, where the wine changes from ruby to garnet. On the other hand, some grape varieties like Nebbiolo, which is found in Barolo and Barbaresco, lose their color quite quickly and show a garnet rim even when young. And for this wine, we assess it as garnet. So for appearance, we write clear, deep, garnet color. Even for your level 3 exam, there are only 2 points allotted for the clarity, intensity, and color. So don't fixate on the color, make a call and move on to the important stuff, which is the aromas and flavors. That's where you're going to gain the most points on your exam in level 3. First, we're just going to quickly assess if the wine is clean or unclean. And this is in reference to the absence of faults. Now, it's worth noting that most wines are fault-free, but we're just kind of checking to make sure that before we taste something really gross because it's gone off, that we do a quick check and save ourselves from that. The 2 wine faults you need to be aware of at this point are cork taint, which smells like damp cardboard and it is not pleasurable, or closure failure. And that's the trickier one between the two because it still smells kind of good. Closure failure causes oxidation, which pretty much just mimics those same aromas of, dried fruit, of honey, caramel, or coffee, but will lack the fresh fruitiness the winemaker wanted the wine to have. You swirl the wine in the glass because swirling releases the aromas when it gets into contact with the oxygen. Now, this is easiest to do when it's on a flat surface or a table, not in the air where it can just come out. But after swirling, you place your nose close to the glass like this and take a sniff. And this wine is clean. On the nose, we first assess the intensity, and we have 3 scales from the SAT to work with: light, medium, or pronounced. And as a general guide, if the aromas are immediately apparent when you insert your nose into the glass, they are pronounced. If you find the aromas really hard to detect and faint, the intensity is light. And of course, then there's that whole range in the middle of medium. Now, I've also seen some tasters determine aroma intensity by placing their glass under their chin and slowly moving the glass up. And they determine whether or not a wine is low, medium, or pronounced intensity by when they start smelling the aromas and where it hits them on their chin. This is not the technique that I use, but you will develop your own technique with practice. And this wine has medium intensity aromas. So now before we describe this wine, I want to tell you some solid advice I have for identifying aromas and flavors in a wine tasting. And here it is. You won't know if it's there unless you ask yourself, is it there? I'm going to provide a little more detail on that in just a moment. So now, as your book says, you do not gain points for mentioning the aroma clusters. However, if you're struggling to find which fruits there are, then I suggest we first ask ourselves if we can smell a cluster. So for red wines, we might ask ourselves, am I smelling red fruits or black fruits or both? Once we find a cluster such as red fruits, then we can work our way through that cluster group in the wine lexicon and ask ourselves, is this tart red fruit like red currant or cranberry, or is this riper fruit such as strawberry and red cherry? Next, this leads us into asking what the condition of those fruits are. For example, are these unripe fruits, ripe fruits, dried fruit, or cooked fruit? The point is, in order for you to know if it's there, you have to ask yourself, is it there? And go through all of them at the beginning. So I sniff this wine and I find that there are red fruits and black fruits. Of course, this is easier to do if you have this in your hand. Strawberries, red cherry. There's both red and black plums, and there's some fresh fruit in here and there's some dried fruit in here. There's some prunes or dried plums. Let's look at herbaceous. Is there green pepper? Is there grass? Is there tomato leaf? Touch of tomato leaf. But there's definitely some herbal in here. There's a little bit of mint. Now, looking at oak, there's certainly cloves, touch of coconut, cedar, and coffee. And I think coffee, you'll notice, is both a secondary aroma and a tertiary aroma. But for tertiary aromas, those are the aromas and flavors of maturation. Definitely dried fruit. Definitely some earth and mushroom. Oh, tobacco. Oh yeah, there's some tobacco in here. This is actually a lot going on in this wine. That's why I picked it. Oh, that mint is fun. That mint is really fun. A little licorice. I'm going to go back to licorice too because there's quite a bit of spice happening in this. So now that we have our medium intensity of aromas and all of those things, Finally, we get to taste the wine, and we want to taste the wine and slurp it up and mix it with the air and make sure the wine coats our entire mouth cavity. The first structural element we need to assess is the sweetness, and this is a very deliberate choice by WSET. Why? Because sweetness is the level of residual sugar in the wine as detected by the tip of our tongue, and we detect sweetness immediately as soon as the wine enters our mouth. So I really want you to concentrate at this point at the tip of your tongue. A dry wine will have no sugar in it or has levels that are so low they can't be detected by the tongue. If you taste just a little bit of sweetness, the wine is off dry. And if there is a distinct presence of sugar, but not enough to partner with most desserts, then the wine is medium. And if the sweetness is a prominent feature of the wine is sweet. Now, you're going to miss sweetness throughout your entire tasting career because you will forget to ask yourself, is it there? Here's another hint. If the sweetness comes after in your palate, but not immediately when it hits the tip of your tongue, then that's actually the fruitiness of the wine being displayed and not the residual sugar in the wine. Again, sweetness is detected at the tip of our tongue as soon as it enters our mouth. This wine is dry. Next on the palate, acidity. Your book gives you another way to assess acidity, and there's no wrong way, whatever works. But this is what I do. I take a sip, suck in the air, swirl, and spit it out. And as soon as we spit it out, let's keep our mouths open and feel the water gushing. Don't swallow. Now, our scale for acidity is low, medium, or high. Most wines are going to be either medium or high, and this wine has medium acidity. Notice how these things are totally just fitting in with what we read in our book. Next, as this is a red wine, we assess tannin. Now, with white wines, at this point, we don't assess the tannin. Furthermore, tannin is assessed as low, medium, or high. And you know, tasters will experience tannin differently, and here's my advice and how I approach this. I can only accurately assess tannin after I swirl the wine in my mouth 3 times. Only then has the tannin built up enough for me to gauge it correctly. And how I feel tannin is on the top of my gums, and it's like this pulling feeling, which is the drying sensation that's mentioned in your textbook. So I've already had a couple sips, so I should be able to do this the next one, but let's just see. I'm gonna do one more. This wine has medium tannin. Next, on the palate, we will assess alcohol as either low, medium, or high. And alcohol levels are set precisely as the percentage of abbreviated alcohol in the wine. And here's what I do. I take a sip, I suck in air, and I feel how much warmth there is going to the back of my throat as I suck in the air. Then I do a second check after spitting out the wine. I immediately suck in air again, and I feel the heat. And I would say this wine has medium alcohol. But then I check the label of the wine to confirm. And if we have incorrectly gauged the alcohol level, then take another sip, suck in air, make a mental note of the warmth we can feel in the back of our throats, and then say to yourself, this is what a medium alcohol wine feels like. Body also has 3 scales: light, medium, and full. And body is the overall impression of how the wine feels in your mouth. You can think about this, about how skim milk feels in your mouth versus 2% milk compared to whipped cream. Each of those has a different feeling and weight on your palate. This wine is medium body, and usually the weight of the wine has a lot to do with the alcohol levels. Now, it also has to do with the residual sugar. Everything in wine is structural element in wine is affected by other structural elements, but this wine has medium body. Now for flavor intensity, which is either light, medium, or pronounced. Most wines will have the same flavor intensity as the aroma intensity. However, some spice characteristics tend to be more apparent on the palate than on the nose, and opposingly, often floral aromas are less prominent on the palate than they are on the nose. Both are good indications. It is worth noting that generally, we expect a good wine to either be equal in aroma and flavor intensity or to go up in intensity from the nose to the palate. If, on the other hand, the flavors go down in intensity on the palate than on the nose, this will detract a little bit from the quality assessment of our wine later on. Furthermore, flavor characteristics are generally the same as on the nose because in truth, the tongue can only taste sweetness, acidity, bitterness, salt, and umami. All of those other descriptors are actually what you smell. So for the palate, do note down any additional flavors that may become apparent due to the warming of the wine in your mouth. And remember, we should really take our time going through the wine lexicon and asking ourselves, is it there? Yes, you can see the spice characteristics come out a bit more clove, more nutmeg. But generally speaking, it is still the same. We've got that mix of the dried and fresh strawberry and plums. And plum, we've got more black plum. There's a bit of red fruit and black fruit. There is quite a lot of spice notes. And how about our earthy characteristics and our tertiary? Tobacco, earth and mushroom. Touch mint, not as much as on the nose. But I would still say that this, it has gone up a little bit in intensity. This is still medium intensity flavor characteristics, but it has all of those things that are there on the nose. When you write your tasting note for me, you don't have to mention all of the flavors that are the same on the palate as they are on the nose, but do let me know that you taste the same thing on the palate, and then add any other changes from the nose to the palate. The finish is how long those flavors last in our mouth after we've spit the wine out. In particular, we're assessing the persistence of the desirable sensations. We would not, for example, consider a wine that has like a very long bitterness on the finish without having any refreshing fruit characteristics to go along with it. We wouldn't think that would be a wine that has a long length. Neither should we consider a wine whose acidity and sour notes linger on the finish as a wine with long length. Also be careful of things like the oak flavor characteristics. If the oak is the last thing that you taste, which comes in kind of tied in with that bitterness, you need to have the fruit and the freshness following through on the length. And length is, it's on a scale, just like everything else. It could be short, medium, or long finish. As you can see. Okay. Oh yeah, that's a long finish. This wine has a long finish. Now we need to do our quality assessment. Either the wine is poor, acceptable, good, very good, or outstanding. Draw our conclusions for the wine quality based on 4 parameters: balance, length, intensity, and complexity, otherwise known as our BLIC. Balance, which is how all of the structural elements come together, for example, is the alcohol in balance with the fruit flavors, and in this case, yes, they are. Is the medium acidity and intensity of the fruit flavors on the palate in harmony, for example, and yes, they are. In an aged wine such as this, I might also ask myself if all that dried fruit is in balance with the fresh fruit and the acidity, and is it still like thirst quenching? And yes, it is. The length we have already assessed as long, so that's a bonus. For intensity, if a wine shows weak or dilute flavors, you may not give it a mark for intensity, but just because this wine has just medium intensity aromas and flavor and it's not pronounced, it doesn't diminish this wine in any way because it still went up in intensity from the nose to the palate, although still in that medium range, and the flavors felt or taste quite concentrated to me. And there's no doubt that this wine is complex. Have both red and black fruits. We said both fresh and dried strawberries and black plums. And I was able to find herbaceous notes of tomato leaf, herbal notes such as mint, and spice notes like licorice, as well as oak notes such as vanilla, clove, and coconut. And then there were the notes from aging like tobacco and earth and mushroom. And as this wine rates positively on all 4 criteria, this wine is outstanding. As always, I'm always here for you, so you can contact me via chat or inbox box. Chat is preferred so that everyone can benefit from your questions. And other than that, I look forward to your tasting notes, and we'll talk to you soon in discussions or announcements. Bye.